The left side of politics has something to hold on to. There was communes even in West Berlin and all that sort of carry on. And when all that collapsed, there was not much left. I mean, the world is actually in probably the finest place. Society, the world's civilizations is in the finest place it's ever been in history, most likely. I mean, some people might say we're far better off than little tribes and we lived peacefully and walked around, as maybe as Neanderthal man. But at the end of the day, it sounds very nice, but everyone was dying from disease, and child, birth death rate would have been about 80%. So, we are actually in a very fine place in life. Two of the biggest populations in the world are catching up at a phenomenal rate, of course, India and China. And so their living standard, yes, they have problems, of course, and we can't just, look at Beijing and say that's China. China is a large agrarian society, and there's a lot of peasants who got a long way to go. But basically, the world has been relatively stable, and people's lives have been getting better. So the left side of politics, what have they got to complain about? They need something. They need something to grab onto, to hold onto. And the whole we are destroying our planet with CO2 is an awesome, topic. So they switched from, the East-West debate and whether communism was perhaps a better lifestyle, and they grabbed onto the CO2. And it's the same debate, really, which is industrialization is bad, and let's go back to bivouacs.
Yeah, yeah. So exactly, because that's one of my questions here for you as well. If the green agenda basically is connected with this idea of stopping industrialization as well, then, because if some points that were raised by some of the people that we talked to in Copenhagen as well was that if the carbon reducing laws or restrictions are indeed put in place, this potentially could cause millions of deaths around the world, specifically those in the developing countries. What can you say about that, James?
Well, absolutely. I mean, this whole biofuels thing, I get to the petrol pump and I see the 10% ethanol, and I go, oh my God, it's just one of the worst things that possibly could happen. It's destabilized the sugar industry around the world. You see, a lot of people, in places, let's say in Brazil and that, they're having to burn down the rainforest for two things. One, for food, and the other is for just creating more plantations of sugarcane. And what's happening is that we're destroying. This is kind of the ironic thing is a policy that's meant to prevent CO2 production is leading to more CO2 production and to grief, because we're destroying the rainforest, and we're also increasing the price of food. Therefore, local people can't afford their own food that they're selling, and they're starving.
Yes,
and we're actually creating more CO2 from this policy. So it's a really counterproductive policy. I haven't kept on the latest state of play, and maybe the green credits thing has changed. But as far as I knew, you got green credits for planting, not necessarily for destroying the rainforest in the first place. So as long as those companies were planting trees, the fact that they destroyed some in the process, it still gave them a green credit. So I don't know. You got to be wary of these policies. There's a lot of rorting, as I like saying in Australia. There's a lot of bureaucracy where people are just playing the money. And it's not really creating a benefit.
I see. And, if we carry on from that and talk a little bit about the new green economy as well, then cap and trade and things like that. You mentioned that your company would potentially be one of these companies that would make a lot of money because of this. And do you think that that's one of the main reasons here as well then? Because some people would argue that indeed causing mass starvation around the planet, causing even more problems, is actually part of the plan from the point of view of the global elite and so forth. Don't know if you want to comment on that or not, but the new green economy, maybe you can talk about that as well. Go ahead, James.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Henrik. You touched on a very conspiratorial topic at the end there about it's basically a one world government. I'm sure we'll end up talking about that. I've tried to not be too cynical and propound that idea too much, but we could perhaps talk about it as well.
Yes.
Cap and trade, cap and trade, it's a tax. Now, they say, it's not a tax. No, it is a tax. And, I talked to a lawyer and he says, the definition of tax in law is different. Well, it's the same thing. It really is. It's just another mechanism. Now, if you talk to my economist friends, they say you could have a carbon tax, which would be, I guess, say to your listeners, just a flat rate that whenever you burn a certain amount of CO2 and they think they can measure it, of course they can't always, but they can sometimes measure, we're going to tax you. We're going to add that to the cost of that product. The petrol will go up by 10% and etc. But the other mechanism that's proposed is cap and trade, and it is a tax, as I said. But the economists say it is better because it's extremely complex. Basically, it's a more efficient way of getting your goal. Because for some people, some commodities are worth a lot of money. So let's say petrol is worth a lot of money. So people will be willing to use petrol because the profit at the end is greater. They have a larger margin. So some people will be willing to use more, let's say to buy more CO2. And other people in the market, well, the margin is quite small, and they would actually prefer to reduce their production of CO2 because that's the best way for them to save money. So it's a form of market efficiency whereby different industries have quotas, and the inefficient industries will subsidize the efficient. There's a market forcing to make people more efficient, which is the principle is all there, and that's not disagreed. But in the end of the day, it is a massive tax, and any form of mechanism on a industry will hamper it. I mean, there's always this huge, great debate on market forces versus regulation. Now, we have to have some regulation, of course, because yes, and of course, it doesn't happen in our company, but yes, we will try to play the field and monopolize and to, monopolize any situation to our benefit. So yes, business people are generally, good people, but they will take an opportunity which may be a bit gray area and maybe not the best for the people if we can. So yes, we do need to have some control. I absolutely agree that there should be regulation. The big question, of course, is the balance between government regulation and difference between government regulation and government control. And that's the problem. See, there's one thing regulating a market, and there's one actually controlling the market. And I think that's where this whole cap and trade is leading us to, is about control. What we're saying is with this cap and trade, it's a massive tax, and it's complete market mechanism. It is controlling the market in a massive way. So it really is perhaps the more left view of life, which is that, business cannot be trusted and that a benevolent, dictator is the way forward. Well, I agree. If we could have a benevolent dictator, the system will work best. For instance, one of the big debates in the energy field, and this is a debate which is really ubiquitous, it's really something that happens anywhere in business, is whether we should have a single government entity, controlling electricity, a nationalized industry, or a free market. Well, if we had some supercomputer with, artificial intelligence out there, which could say, okay, this power station its chimney stack is out of order. They call it, an outage. We will therefore ramp up the energy in this power station to cover it. And if everything was a perfect computer program and everything was like that, then it would be the best way. We can call that the benevolent dictator type thing. But in reality, we're talking about a bureaucracy. And bureaucracies never work efficiently like that. We have just found, and the reason why communism with its 100%, job rate, employment rate collapsed. If you say, here's your job, you have your job, whatever you do, it's not going to work because you haven't got motivation. Everyone needs to have a modus operandi in life, And so bureaucracies tend to be like that. There tend to be jobs for life. And we do need bureaucracies, and they are extremely important. We need them as regulators. And without them, the market will actually end up collapsing as well. But to say that the whole thing should be run by one bureaucracy, I have one nationalized electricity industry, it can work, and we did survive for a long time. For instance, Australia only, I would say in 98, actually deregulated. But it is more efficient now. But that is a big debate, control versus, independent thought. But competition, of course.
And it's all, again, just from the perspective that you're coming. If you're talking about efficiency of society, then you're into another realm. But if you're talking about happy human beings, then you're coming from another point of view in regards to that discussion.
Absolutely. Well, many perhaps on the left side of politics will say that you are happier without the competition because competition is stress. And yes, that is also true. But then that's why we hopefully have many forms of job in life. You don't have to be some, businessman who's fighting against other businesses for, for this electricity and for big profits and all that. And perhaps you don't want to have stress in life. But then other people do live off stress. And what they do is often extremely efficient.